Did you know that 73% of military personnel who experience systematic harassment from superior officers never report it, choosing instead to endure in silence rather than risk their entire career? What you're about to hear is the story of one Marine who refused to stay silent, and how 15 years later, he would turn the tables on the man who tried to destroy him. My name is Sergeant Major William Hayes. You're watching Razor Edge. If you're ready to witness how honor and persistence can overcome corruption, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Because today's story proves that in the military, what goes around doesn't just come around, it comes back with the full force of justice behind it. Fort Pendleton, California, March 15, 2003. The morning sun cast long shadows across the parade ground as Private First Class Diego Martinez stood at attention, his dress blues immaculate, his bearing perfect. At 19 years old, Martinez had already distinguished himself as one of the most promising Marines in his unit. His marksmanship scores were near perfect, his physical fitness tests consistently maxed out, and his tactical thinking impressed even the most seasoned NCOs. But none of that would matter in the next 60 seconds. Colonel James Richardson emerged from the administrative building, his stride purposeful and predatory. At 43, Richardson was everything the Marine Corps wanted in a field-grade officer, on paper. Tall, imposing, with a chest full of ribbons and a reputation for running a tight unit. What the official records didn't show was Richardson's darker talent, his ability to systematically destroy promising young Marines who threatened to outshine him. Martinez had made a critical error 3 weeks earlier. During a tactical exercise, he had identified a flaw in Richardson's battle plan, a flaw that could have gotten Marines killed in real combat. When Martinez respectfully suggested an alternative approach through proper channels, Richardson's ego took a direct hit, and Richardson never forgot a slight. "Private Martinez," Richardson's voice cut across the parade ground like a blade. "Front and center!" Martinez double-timed to Richardson's position, snapping to attention with parade ground precision. Around them, other Marines began to gather, sensing something significant was about to unfold. Richardson had chosen his moment carefully. Maximum visibility, maximum humiliation. But what Richardson said next would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. "Private Martinez, you stand accused of cowardice in the face of simulated enemy contact during last week's field exercise." Richardson's voice carried across the parade ground, ensuring every Marine within 50 meters could hear every word. "Multiple witnesses report that you abandoned your position and endangered your fellow Marines." The accusation hit Martinez like a physical blow. Cowardice. In the Marine Corps, there was no greater shame, no more devastating charge. Around him, he could hear the sharp intake of breath from his fellow Marines, the whispered conversations beginning to spread like wildfire. Martinez's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "Sir, I respectfully request to see the witness statements and—" "You'll see nothing, Private." Richardson stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper that only Martinez could hear. "You embarrassed me in front of my staff. You questioned my tactical judgment. Now you'll learn what happens to Marines who forget their place." The colonel stepped back, raising his voice again for the crowd. "Private Martinez, you are hereby reduced in rank to private, forfeiting all pay and allowances for 30 days. You will report to the base sanitation detail for the remainder of your deployment, and I am personally recommending that you be transferred to a non-combat MOS, as you are clearly unfit for the infantry." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Martinez felt his carefully built military career crumbling around him. 3 years of perfect service, countless hours of training, dreams of leading Marines in combat, all destroyed in less than 2 minutes. But as Richardson turned to walk away, Martinez made a decision that would echo through the next 15 years. "Sir," Martinez's voice rang out clear and strong, "I request a formal investigation into these charges." Richardson froze mid-stride. Slowly, he turned back to face the young Marine, his eyes cold as winter steel. "What did you say, Private?" "I said I request a formal investigation, sir, as is my right under the Uniform Code of Military Justice." A dangerous smile played at the corners of Richardson's mouth. "Very well, Private, but understand this. I have 20 years in this Corps. I have connections you can't imagine. By the time I'm finished with you, you'll be lucky to get an honorable discharge." Richardson leaned in close one final time. "You want to play games with me, boy? I'll bury you so deep, your own mother won't recognize what's left of your career." As Richardson walked away, Martinez stood alone on the parade ground, surrounded by Marines who now looked at him with a mixture of pity and suspicion. The formal investigation would clear him of the cowardice charges 6 weeks later, but the damage was done. His reputation was destroyed, his career derailed, and his faith in the system shattered. But in that moment of complete humiliation, Private Diego Martinez made a vow that would sustain him through the dark years ahead. He would survive, he would excel, and someday, somehow, Colonel James Richardson would answer for what he had done. What Martinez didn't know was that Richardson had played this game before, many times. The colonel had a system, a pattern of identifying promising young Marines who might threaten his position and systematically destroying them before they could become a problem. But this time, Richardson had chosen the wrong target. 15 years later, Quantico, Virginia, Intelligence Division Headquarters. Staff Sergeant Diego Martinez sat in front of 3 high-resolution monitors, his fingers dancing across encrypted keyboards with the precision of a surgeon. The 19-year-old private who had been humiliated on that parade ground was gone, replaced by one of the Marine Corps' most elite intelligence specialists. The transformation hadn't been easy. After Richardson's public destruction of his career, Martinez had spent 2 years in sanitation details, mess hall duty, and every other degrading assignment the colonel could devise. But instead of breaking him, the humiliation had forged him into something harder, something more dangerous. Martinez had used those dark years to study intelligence analysis, computer systems, foreign languages, and most importantly, how the military's bureaucratic machine really worked. He learned who had real power, how information flowed, and where the bodies were buried. By 2005, Martinez had clawed his way into military intelligence. By 2010, he had earned his stripes as a staff sergeant. By 2015, he had become one of the Corps' go-to specialists for sensitive investigations involving high-ranking personnel. But he had never forgotten Colonel Richardson. "Martinez!" The voice of Major Sarah Chen, his commanding officer, cut through his concentration. "I've got a priority assignment for you." Martinez swiveled his chair to face the major, a woman whose reputation for uncovering corruption was legendary throughout the intelligence community. "What's the target, ma'am?" "We've received allegations of irregularities in several after-action reports from Afghanistan, 2004 through 2006. Someone's been falsifying mission outcomes, possibly covering up operational failures that resulted in casualties." Martinez felt his pulse quicken, but kept his expression neutral. "Any specific units or personnel involved?" Major Chen handed him a classified folder marked with the highest security clearances. 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines. The commanding officer during that period was... She paused, checking her notes. But what she said next would change everything. "Colonel James Richardson. He's up for promotion to Brigadier General next month. The Pentagon wants this investigation completed before the promotion board convenes." Martinez stared at the folder in his hands, feeling the weight of 15 years of suppressed anger and determination. Richardson, the man who had tried to destroy him, was now within reach, and Martinez held the tools to uncover whatever secrets the colonel had been hiding. "Sir, I should mention that Colonel Richardson and I have history." Major Chen raised an eyebrow. "What kind of history?" "He was my commanding officer at Pendleton in 2003. We had a professional disagreement that resulted in disciplinary action against me. Disciplinary action that was later overturned, according to your record." Chen studied Martinez carefully. "Can you handle this investigation objectively?" Martinez met her gaze without flinching. "Ma'am, if Colonel Richardson has been falsifying reports and covering up failures that cost Marines their lives, then he needs to answer for that. Personal history aside, that's what justice demands." Chen nodded slowly. "Very well. You have full access to classified databases, personnel records, and operational reports. But Martinez, if I find out you're pursuing a personal vendetta instead of following the evidence, I'll have you court-martialed myself." "Understood, ma'am." As Major Chen left his workstation, Martinez opened the classified folder with hands that remained perfectly steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. Inside were preliminary reports, witness statements, and a list of operations that had gone wrong during Richardson's command. But it was the last document that made Martinez's blood run cold. Operation Desert Falcon, September 12, 2005. A reconnaissance mission in Helmand Province that had resulted in the deaths of 4 Marines and the wounding of 6 others. According to Richardson's after-action report, the mission had been a tactical success that eliminated a high-value target. Martinez pulled up the classified database and began cross-referencing Richardson's report with intelligence intercepts, medical records, and communications logs from that day. What he found made his hands clench into fists. Richardson's report was a complete fabrication. There had been no high-value target. The intelligence that led to the mission had been outdated by 3 weeks. The Marines had walked into an ambush that Richardson should have seen coming if he had bothered to verify his sources. But instead of admitting his failure, Richardson had rewritten history. Martinez dug deeper, his training taking over as he methodically dismantled Richardson's web of lies. For the next 6 hours, he traced communication logs, cross-referenced personnel files, and analyzed operational data with the skill of a master detective. What he discovered was worse than he had imagined. Richardson hadn't just covered up one failed mission. Over a 3-year period, the colonel had systematically falsified reports, stolen credit for successful operations led by his subordinates, and buried evidence of tactical failures that had cost the lives of 17 Marines. But the most damning evidence was yet to come. Martinez accessed Richardson's personal communication logs from 2005, messages that should have been deleted years ago but had been preserved in a backup server that Richardson didn't know existed. One message, sent 3 days after Operation Desert Falcon, made Martinez's vision blur with rage. The mission failure was due to inadequate reconnaissance by subordinate officers. I have taken appropriate disciplinary action and restructured the unit's command hierarchy. No further investigation is necessary. Colonel J. Richardson. Richardson had blamed his own failures on the Marines who had died following his orders. Martinez leaned back in his chair, his mind racing with the implications of what he had uncovered. He had enough evidence to destroy Richardson's career, strip him of his rank, and possibly send him to prison. But as he stared at the evidence on his screen, Martinez realized something that changed everything about his approach to this investigation. Richardson was still out there, still in command, still making decisions that could get Marines killed. And in 3 weeks, he would be promoted to Brigadier General, giving him even more power to cover up his failures and destroy the careers of anyone who threatened to expose him. Martinez reached for his secure phone to call Major Chen, but then stopped. There was something else he needed to check first, something that would determine not just Richardson's fate, but the fate of every Marine who had ever served under him. He pulled up Richardson's current assignment, Fort Lejeune, North Carolina, 2nd Marine Expeditionary Force, commanding a unit scheduled for deployment to Syria in 6 weeks. Richardson was about to take another group of Marines into combat, armed with the same arrogance and incompetence that had already cost 17 lives. Martinez made his decision. This wouldn't just be an investigation. This would be a reckoning. Fort Lejeune, North Carolina. 3 days after Martinez's discovery. The secure video conference connected Martinez to Major Chen at Quantico. But what he was about to reveal would require more than just his commanding officer's attention. On the screen, Martinez could see that Chen had been joined by Colonel Patricia Hayes from the Inspector General's office and Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Thompson from the Judge Advocate General's Corps. This was no longer just an investigation. It was building a case for court-martial. "Staff Sergeant Martinez," Colonel Hayes began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent 25 years rooting out corruption in the Corps. "Major Chen has briefed us on your preliminary findings. We need you to walk us through everything you've discovered about Colonel Richardson's activities." Martinez had spent 72 hours without sleep, methodically building an airtight case against the man who had tried to destroy him 15 years earlier. But as he began his presentation, his voice remained steady and professional. Ma'am, I've identified a pattern of misconduct spanning Richardson's entire command tenure from 2003 to 2007. The evidence falls into three categories: falsified after-action reports, misappropriation of credit for successful operations, and systematic cover-up of tactical failures resulting in casualties. Martinez pulled up the first document on his screen. Operation Desert Falcon, September 2005. Richardson's official report claims the mission eliminated a high-value target and resulted in minimal friendly casualties. The reality: he switched to a classified intelligence intercept. The target had been dead for 3 weeks. Richardson failed to verify current intelligence, leading 4 Marines into an ambush that was entirely preventable. Colonel Hayes leaned forward. "You said this was part of a pattern. How many similar incidents?" 17 separate operations over 4 years, ma'am, each one following the same template. Richardson makes a tactical error. Marines die or are wounded, and Richardson rewrites the reports to shift blame to subordinates or claim success where there was failure. But what Martinez revealed next would shock even these seasoned investigators. The most damning evidence comes from Richardson's personal communications with Pentagon liaisons. He wasn't just covering up failures. He was actively seeking high-profile assignments to boost his promotion prospects, regardless of the risk to his Marines. Martinez displayed a series of encrypted messages that he had painstakingly decoded. In this communication from March 2006, Richardson requests assignment to a high-visibility counterinsurgency operation in Fallujah. When his superiors express concern about his unit's readiness, Richardson responds. Martinez read directly from the screen. "My Marines are expendable assets in service of the larger mission. Casualties are acceptable if they advance strategic objectives and enhance the Corps' reputation." The silence on the video conference was deafening. Lieutenant Colonel Thompson was the first to speak. "Staff Sergeant, are you certain about the authenticity of these communications?" "Sir, I verified them through 3 independent sources. The encryption keys match Richardson's personal codes, the timestamps align with his known activities, and the language patterns match his documented writing style." Major Chen's voice was tight with controlled anger. How many Marines died because of Richardson's decisions? Martinez had dreaded this question, but he had the answer ready. "Based on my analysis, 17 KIA and 31 WIA over the 4-year period. But ma'am, that's not the worst part." He pulled up Richardson's current assignment roster. Richardson is currently commanding 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines at Lejeune. They're scheduled for deployment to Syria in 5 weeks. Based on his historical pattern, I estimate a 40% higher casualty rate than comparable units if he maintains command. Colonel Hayes stood up abruptly. "We need to move fast. If Richardson gets wind of this investigation, he'll start destroying evidence and intimidating witnesses." But Martinez had already thought of that. "Ma'am, I've been monitoring Richardson's communications and activities for the past 72 hours. He has no idea he's under investigation. However, I did discover something that changes our timeline significantly." Martinez pulled up a recent email exchange. Richardson has been in contact with a defense contractor about a consulting position after his retirement. The contract is contingent on his promotion to Brigadier General and includes a clause about maintaining security clearances. "He's planning to cash in on his rank and access," Thompson observed. "Classic corruption pattern." "Yes, sir, but there's more. The contractor is bidding on a Pentagon contract worth $2.3 billion for tactical communication systems. If Richardson influences that contract award." Martinez didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone on the call understood the implications. Major Chen's voice cut through the tension. "Martinez, I need you to understand something. What you've uncovered goes beyond simple misconduct. This is a conspiracy that could reach into the highest levels of military procurement. Are you prepared for what comes next?" Martinez thought about the 19-year-old private who had stood alone on that parade ground 15 years ago, humiliated and broken, but not defeated. He thought about the 17 Marines who had died because of Richardson's arrogance and incompetence. He thought about the Marines currently under Richardson's command, preparing for deployment while trusting their lives to a man who saw them as expendable assets. "Ma'am, I've been preparing for this moment for 15 years. Colonel Hayes nodded approvingly. "Very well. Staff Sergeant Martinez, You are hereby assigned as the primary investigator for Operation Clean Sweep. You will have unlimited access to classified databases and full authority to interview personnel and examine evidence. She paused, her expression growing even more serious. But Martinez, you need to understand, Richardson has powerful allies. Once we move against him, there will be retaliation. Your career, your reputation, everything you've built could be at risk. Martinez's response came without hesitation. Ma'am, my career was already destroyed once by Colonel Richardson. I survived that. But those 17 Marines didn't survive his incompetence, and the Marines under his command right now deserve better. As the video conference ended, Martinez sat alone in his secure workspace, surrounded by evidence that would bring down one of the Marine Corps' most decorated officers. But he knew the real battle was just beginning. Richardson had spent 20 years building a network of allies and covering his tracks. He had powerful friends in the Pentagon, connections in Congress, and a reputation that would make many people reluctant to believe the evidence against him. But Martinez had something Richardson had never expected him to develop: patience, skill, and an unshakable commitment to justice. The hunt was about to begin, and this time, Martinez held all the advantages. Fort Lejeune, North Carolina, Richardson's office. 800 hours. Colonel James Richardson sat behind his mahogany desk, reviewing deployment orders for his upcoming Syria mission, when his aide knocked on the door. At 58, Richardson had perfected the image of a distinguished Marine officer: silver hair, pressed uniform, and a chest full of ribbons that told the story of a decorated career. What he didn't know was that his carefully constructed facade was about to crumble. "Sir, there's a Staff Sergeant Martinez here from Quantico Intelligence Division. He says he needs to speak with you about some operational reports." Richardson's pen stopped moving across the paper. Martinez. The name triggered a memory from 15 years ago, a young private he had destroyed for questioning his authority. But that Marine had been transferred out of his unit and disappeared into the bureaucratic machine. "Send him in." Staff Sergeant Diego Martinez entered the office with the bearing of a seasoned intelligence professional. Gone was the 19-year-old private who had been humiliated on the parade ground. In his place stood a man who had spent 15 years preparing for this moment. Richardson looked up from his desk, and for a split second, Martinez saw recognition flicker in the colonel's eyes. "Staff Sergeant Martinez," Richardson said, his voice carefully neutral. "What can I do for the Intelligence Division?" Martinez placed a classified folder on Richardson's desk with deliberate precision. "Sir, I'm conducting a routine review of after-action reports from your command in Afghanistan 2004 to 2007. I have a few questions about operational procedures." Richardson's hand moved toward the folder, but something in Martinez's demeanor made him hesitate. "I'm sure my reports were thorough and accurate. Is there a specific concern?" "Actually, sir, there are several concerns." Martinez opened the folder and pulled out the first document, Operation Desert Falcon's After-Action Report. This report claims the mission successfully eliminated a high-value target with minimal casualties. However, intelligence intercepts from that date indicate the target had been deceased for 3 weeks prior to the operation. The color drained from Richardson's face, but his voice remained steady. "Intelligence can be unreliable in combat situations. We acted on the best information available." But Martinez was just getting started. "Sir, I've cross-referenced your report with medical evacuation records, communications logs, and satellite imagery from September 12, 2005. The evidence shows that 4 Marines died in an ambush that could have been prevented with proper intelligence verification." Richardson stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Staff Sergeant, I don't appreciate your tone or your implications. My record speaks for itself." Martinez remained seated, his voice calm and professional. "Your record is exactly what I'm here to discuss, sir." He pulled out another document. Operation Iron Thunder, March 2006. Your report claims tactical success and commends your leadership under fire. However, the actual operation resulted in 6 wounded Marines and the failure to secure the objective. Richardson's hands began to tremble slightly. "These are classified operations. How did you—" "I have full authorization from the Inspector General's office to review all materials related to your command, sir." Martinez stood up now, his presence filling the room with quiet authority. "Colonel Richardson, Over the past week, I've documented 17 separate incidents where your after-action reports contained significant discrepancies with the actual operational outcomes. Richardson's carefully maintained composure began to crack. This is harassment. I'll have your career for this, Martinez. I know who you are. You're that insubordinate private from Pendleton. This is personal vendetta, not professional investigation. Martinez smiled for the first time since entering the office. You remember me? Good. That saves us both some time. He pulled out a thick stack of documents and spread them across Richardson's desk. These are communications logs from your personal account, sir. Messages discussing your post-retirement consulting opportunities with Blackwater Defense Systems. Richardson's face went white. Those communications are privileged. Not when they involve potential conflicts of interest related to active military contracts, sir. Martinez read from one of the documents. My promotion to Brigadier General will provide valuable access to procurement decisions. The Syria deployment will demonstrate my continued relevance to modern military operations. The office fell silent except for the sound of Richardson's labored breathing. But Martinez wasn't finished. Colonel, I know about the 17 Marines who died because of your tactical failures. I know about the reports you falsified to cover up your incompetence. I know about the subordinates you blamed for your mistakes. Martinez leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. And I know about the Marines currently under your command who are scheduled to deploy to Syria in 4 weeks. Richardson collapsed back into his chair, his hands shaking visibly now. What do you want? I want justice, sir. For the Marines who died. For the families who were told their sons and daughters died heroically when they actually died, because their commanding officer was more concerned with his career than their lives. Martinez gathered the documents and placed them back in the folder. Colonel Richardson, you are hereby notified that you are under investigation by the Inspector General's office for violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, including dereliction of duty, conduct unbecoming an officer, and conspiracy to defraud the United States government. Richardson's voice was barely audible. Martinez, Diego, we can work this out. I made mistakes, but, sir, 15 years ago, you told me you would bury me so deep that my own mother wouldn't recognize what was left of my career. Martinez stood at attention, his bearing perfect, his voice carrying the weight of 15 years of preparation. Today, I'm here to return the favor. As Martinez turned to leave, Richardson called out desperately. Wait, you don't understand the pressure I was under, the impossible situations. I was trying to protect the Corps' reputation. Martinez stopped at the door and turned back one final time. Sir, the Corps' reputation is built on honor, courage, and commitment. You violated all three. He opened the door, then paused. Oh, and Colonel, your deployment to Syria has been cancelled. Your command has been transferred to Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Chen, effective immediately. As Martinez walked out of the office, he could hear Richardson's voice behind him, no longer the commanding officer who had once destroyed a young private's career, but a broken man facing the consequences of 20 years of corruption and cowardice. The hunter had finally become the hunted, but the real justice was yet to come. Camp Pendleton, California. Military courtroom, 6 months later. The same parade ground where Private Diego Martinez had been humiliated 15 years earlier was now filled with Marines, officers, and military personnel who had come to witness the court-martial of Colonel James Richardson. The irony wasn't lost on anyone present, especially not on Staff Sergeant Martinez, who sat in the front row as the prosecution's star witness. Richardson entered the courtroom in dress blues stripped of all ribbons and decorations except his basic service awards. The man who had once commanded with absolute authority now walked with the shuffling gait of someone whose world had completely collapsed. The charges read by the military prosecutor were devastating. 17 counts of dereliction of duty resulting in death, falsification of official documents, conduct unbecoming an officer, conspiracy to defraud the government, and violation of his oath of office. But the most damning evidence was yet to be presented. The prosecution calls Staff Sergeant Diego Martinez to the stand. Martinez rose and walked to the witness stand with the same precision he had maintained throughout his career. As he was sworn in, he caught sight of Richardson's face. The colonel was staring at him with a mixture of hatred and desperate fear. The prosecutor, Lieutenant Colonel Jennifer Walsh, began her questioning methodically. Staff Sergeant Martinez, please tell the court about your relationship with the defendant. Ma'am, Colonel Richardson was my commanding officer at Camp Pendleton from 2003 to 2004. During that time, he subjected me to systematic harassment, false accusations, and attempted to destroy my military career. And what was the basis for this treatment? Martinez's voice remained steady and professional. I had identified tactical flaws in one of the colonel's training exercises and reported them through proper channels. Colonel Richardson viewed this as insubordination and retaliated accordingly. Lieutenant Colonel Walsh moved to the evidence table. Staff Sergeant, I'm showing you Exhibit A, communications logs from Colonel Richardson's personal account. Can you explain how these relate to your investigation? Martinez looked directly at Richardson as he answered. These logs show a pattern of the defendant prioritizing his personal career advancement over the safety and welfare of Marines under his command. In multiple instances, he requested high-risk assignments specifically to enhance his promotion prospects. The prosecutor pulled up a message on the courtroom's display screen. Please read this communication from March 15, 2006. Martinez read aloud. Casualties are an acceptable cost of maintaining the Corps' aggressive reputation. My Marines understand that sacrifice is required for the greater good of the mission. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Several Marine officers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But the most devastating testimony was still to come. Staff Sergeant Martinez, during your investigation, did you discover evidence that Colonel Richardson's actions directly resulted in preventable casualties? Yes, ma'am. I documented 17 separate incidents where the defendant's tactical failures, combined with his subsequent cover-ups, resulted in the deaths of Marines who should have returned home to their families. Martinez pulled out a folder he had carried to the stand. With the court's permission, I'd like to read the names of those Marines. The judge nodded solemnly. Lance Corporal Michael Chen, age 20, killed in Operation Desert Falcon due to inadequate intelligence verification. Corporal Sarah Williams, age 22, killed in Operation Iron Thunder due to failure to secure flanking positions. Private First Class David Rodriguez, age 19. As Martinez read each name, Richardson's composure finally cracked completely. The colonel began to sob openly, his shoulders shaking as the weight of 17 lives pressed down on him. Martinez continued reading until all 17 names had been spoken aloud in that courtroom, each one a testament to the cost of Richardson's arrogance and incompetence. When he finished, the courtroom was silent, except for the sound of Richardson's weeping. Staff Sergeant Martinez, the prosecutor continued, what was your motivation for pursuing this investigation so thoroughly? Martinez looked directly at Richardson, then turned to address the court. Ma'am, 15 years ago, Colonel Richardson told me that he would destroy my career and that I would never amount to anything in the Marine Corps. He was wrong about that. Martinez's voice grew stronger. But more importantly, he taught me something about the kind of leader I never wanted to become. Every Marine deserves commanders who will put their welfare above personal ambition. Those 17 Marines deserved better than Colonel Richardson gave them. The defense attorney's cross-examination was brief and ineffective. Richardson's own communications had provided all the evidence needed for conviction. When the verdict was read 3 hours later, Richardson was found guilty on all charges. The sentence was severe but just: dismissal from the Marine Corps, forfeiture of all pay and benefits, reduction to the rank of private, and 15 years in military prison. But for Martinez, the real justice came in what happened next. As Richardson was led away in shackles, he stopped in front of Martinez one final time. The broken man who had once wielded absolute power over young Marines looked up at the staff sergeant he had tried to destroy. Martinez, Richardson whispered, his voice barely audible. I'm sorry. For everything. Martinez looked down at the man who had haunted his nightmares for 15 years. Sir, your apology won't bring back those 17 Marines. But maybe their families can finally know the truth about how their children really died. Richardson nodded, tears streaming down his face. Please, tell them I'm sorry. As Richardson was led away, Martinez felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he had carried for 15 years. The young private who had been humiliated on this very base had grown into a Marine who had brought justice not just for himself, but for every Marine who had suffered under Richardson's command. 6 months later, Martinez received orders for his next assignment, Quantico, Virginia, as an instructor at the Marine Corps Intelligence School. His first lecture would be on ethical leadership and the moral obligations of command. But the most meaningful recognition came in the form of a letter from the family of Lance Corporal Michael Chen, the first Marine killed due to Richardson's negligence. Staff Sergeant Martinez, the letter read, "Thank you for giving our son's death meaning by ensuring that the truth finally came to light. Michael always believed that Marines take care of their own. You proved him right." As Martinez stood on the Quantico parade ground, watching a new class of Marine intelligence specialists begin their training, he thought about the long journey from that humiliating day 15 years ago to this moment of vindication. Richardson had been wrong about many things, but he had been right about one. What goes around does come around. Sometimes it just takes 15 years, and sometimes justice arrives with the full force of the Marine Corps behind it. The hunt was over. Justice had been served. And 17 Marines could finally rest in peace, knowing that their sacrifice had not been forgotten and their deaths had not been in vain. Semper Fidelis.